They say when a man sells his brother's blood for gold, the earth herself begins to count his days. Tonight, I will tell you of Kojo, a name once sung in praise, now whispered as a warning. Kojo was loved by everyone. He was the first to help at a funeral and the loudest to cheer at a wedding. But Kojo had a secret that was about to turn his golden reputation into ashes. This is not a story. This is a confession the forest will not let die. Before I begin, make sure you like, share and subscribe to my channel, so you don't miss out on new uploads. Long before the rains forgot Okari, before the river ran thin and the yams grew bitter, there was a village cradled between two hills, where the morning mist rolled in like the breath of ancestors. The air always smelled of firewood and roasting plantain, and if you stood in the market at noon, you could hear the rhythm of life itself, the pound of pesos in wooden mortars, the haggling of traders, the laughter of children chasing chickens through the dust. In this village, friendship was not just valued, it was sacred. To betray a friend was to betray the gods themselves. And in this village lived two boys who would become men side by side, Kojo and Amadi. Kojo was born under a sky streaked with lightning, the son of Obu the blacksmith. His father was a legend, a man whose hands could coax fire into submission and turn raw iron into blades that sang when they caught the air. But when Kojo was only 7 harvests old, a fever took his father, and the forge grew cold. Kojo's mother tried to keep the trade alive, but her hands were not made for fire. They sold the tools, one by one, until all that remained was memory and ash. Kojo learned early that in this world, charm could fill a belly when skill could not. He learned to talk his way into meals, to smile his way into favor, to dance at the edge of every celebration until someone noticed him and pulled him to the center. The village loved him. He was the first to arrive when someone needed help, carrying water for the elderly, climbing trees to fetch kola nuts for ceremonies, singing the loudest at burials to honor the dead. But if you watched him closely, if you ignored the noise and looked into his eyes, you would see something missing. A hollowness. A hunger that no amount of praise could fill. Amadi was born on a quiet morning when the sun rose slow and golden, the son of Udoka the farmer. His father was not famous, but he was respected, a man who spoke little and meant much, whose word was as solid as the earth he tilled. Amadi inherited that steadiness. Where Kojo was a wildfire, Amadi was a river, constant, deep, reliable. He did not seek attention, he earned respect by simply being present. He remembered every name, every face, every kindness owed and every debt unpaid. He would walk 10 miles to return a borrowed hoe. He would sit with a grieving widow in silence because he knew silence was sometimes the only medicine. The village respected Amadi, but they adored Kojo. And that difference, that subtle, poisonous difference, lived in Kojo's chest like a thorn he could never pull out. The two boys became friends before they could even say each other's names properly. Their mothers were close, and so the boys grew up sharing the same mat, the same meals, the same dreams. When Kojo's father died, it was Amadi's family who fed him. When Amadi fell from a tree and broke his arm, it was Kojo who sat beside him every day, telling stories to distract him from the pain. They were inseparable. The village used to say, where you see Kojo's shadow, you will find Amadi. Where you hear Amadi's voice, Kojo is near. They were woven together, two threads in the same cloth. But as they grew into men, the differences between them became more pronounced. Kojo remained charming, but his charm began to feel rehearsed, like a mask he could never take off. Amadi remained quiet, but his quietness felt like strength, like a man who had nothing to prove. Women began to prefer Amadi's steady presence over Kojo's loud affection. Elders began to seek Amadi's counsel, while they only asked Kojo to entertain at gatherings. And Kojo felt it. Every time someone praised Amadi's honesty, Kojo had an unspoken criticism of his own. Every time Amadi was given responsibility, Kojo felt the sting of being overlooked. But he swallowed it. He smiled. He laughed. He danced. And deep inside, the envy grew roots. One afternoon, during the dry season when the sun was merciless and the earth cracked like old leather, the two friends sat beneath the ancient Iroko tree at the edge of the village. They had just spent the morning helping a widow named Momangozi rebuild the roof of her hut, which had collapsed during the last storm. Now they rested in the shade, sharing roasted plantain and palm wine, their bodies sleek with sweat, their hands blistered but satisfied. Amadi looked out toward the horizon, where the forest of echoes stood like a dark wall against the sky, and he said softly, "You know, Kojo, when we are old and our backs are bent like question marks, I hope we are still here, sitting under this tree, sharing stories and palm wine." Kojo laughed, loud and bright, and slapped Amadi on the back. "Old? You will be old, my brother. I will still be dancing at weddings, chasing young girls, and making the elders shake their heads." They both laughed, but Kojo's laughter tasted bitter in his own mouth. Because while Amadi dreamed of growing old together, Kojo was dreaming of something else, of wealth, of power, of finally being seen as more than just the helpful fool. The forest of echoes was a place of old magic and older warnings. It stretched for miles beyond Okari, dense and dark, where the sunlight barely touched the ground and the air was thick with the smell of damp earth and rotten leaves. It was said that the forest had ears, that if you shouted into it, the trees would catch your voice and throw it back at you 3 times. Once for your past. Once for your present. Once for your future. The elders warned that the forest remembered everything, every lie, every sin, every secret whispered in the dark. Children were forbidden to enter. Hunters went only in groups, and only at dawn when the spirits were said to be sleeping. But Amadi was not afraid. He believed the earth held truths that men tried to bury, and he respected the forest the way one respects a wise elder, with caution, but not with fear. One morning, Amadi came to Kojo's hut, his face bright with excitement, his voice barely able to contain itself. "Kojo, I need you to come with me. I have found something. Something important." Kojo looked up from the yam he was peeling, curious. "What is it?" Amadi shook his head. "Not here. Come. You must see it with your own eyes." So Kojo followed, his curiosity growing with every step. They walked through the village, past the market where traders were already shouting their prices, past the shrine where the priestess was lighting incense for the morning prayers, past the boundary stones that marked the edge of safety. And then they entered the forest of echoes. The change was immediate. The noise of the village fell away like a discarded cloak. The air grew cooler, heavier, as if the forest itself were breathing. The trees rose around them like the pillars of some ancient cathedral, their trunks thick and gnarled, their roots twisting across the path like the veins of a sleeping giant. Birds called from the canopy, but their song sounded strange, almost mournful. Kojo felt a shiver run down his spine, but he said nothing. They walked for what felt like hours, deeper and deeper, until Kojo no longer recognized where they were. Finally, Amadi stopped. They stood before what looked like a wall of stone, covered in thick vines and moss, hidden so well that if you weren't looking for it, you would walk right past. Amadi pulled the vines aside, revealing a narrow opening, just wide enough for a man to squeeze through. "I found it 3 days ago," Amadi whispered, his voice reverent. "I have told no one but you, Kojo." "No one." Kojo's heart began to pound. "What is it?" Amadi smiled. "Come and see." Inside, the cave opened into a chamber larger than Kojo had expected. The air was thick and sweet, like incense left burning too long, and the walls were covered in strange markings, symbols Kojo did not recognize, shapes that seemed to move in the dim light. But it was not the walls that stole Kojo's breath. It was what lay in the center of the chamber. Bronze. Piles of it. Figures of gods and warriors, animals and kings, each one crafted with such detail that they seemed almost alive. They glowed faintly in the dim light, as if they held their own fire within. Kojo had never seen so much wealth in his entire life. His hands began to tremble. His mouth went dry. He could feel his heart hammering in his chest like a drum calling him to war. Amadi knelt before the bronze figures and bowed his head, his hands pressed together in prayer. "This belonged to the ancestors, Kojo. This is sacred ground. We cannot touch them. We must tell the elders. They will know what to do." Kojo said nothing. He could not tear his eyes away from the bronze. In his mind, He was already seeing it, a new life, a life where he was not just liked but feared, not just helped but obeyed. He saw himself walking through the market with servants following him, saw himself sitting among the elders not as a guest but as an equal, saw himself finally being more than Amadi's shadow. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft, almost kind. You are right, my brother. We will tell the elders. But not today. Let us sleep on this. Let us think carefully about how to present it. We do not want to cause panic. Amadi looked at him, relieved, trusting. Yes. Yes, you are right. Tomorrow, then. We will speak tomorrow. And Kojo smiled. The kind of smile that does not reach the eyes. That night, Kojo lay on his mat, staring up at the thatched ceiling of his hut, listening to the distant sound of drums from a neighboring village celebrating some wedding or birth. His mind was on fire. He thought about the bronze, about the way it glowed, about the weight of it in his hands. He thought about Amadi's voice, so calm, so sure. We must tell the elders. And Kojo thought about what would happen if they did. The bronze would be taken. It would be placed in the shrine or buried again or divided among the village. And Kojo would get nothing. He would still be the helpful fool, the one who dances at weddings, the one everyone loves but no one respects. Unless. The thought came to him quietly, like a snake sliding through grass. Unless Amadi could not speak. Unless Amadi was not there to tell. Kojo sat up. His chest felt tight. His hands were shaking. He told himself he was just thinking, just considering possibilities. But even as he told himself this, he was already standing, already moving. The moon was full, turning the village into a landscape of silver and shadow. Kojo moved through it like a ghost, knowing every path, every loose stone, every place where the earth creaked underfoot. He went to Amadi's compound. The main hut was dark and silent. Amadi's family was asleep. At the back of the compound stood the granary, a round hut with a thatched roof where Amadi stored his yams and grain, the food that would carry his family through the dry season. Kojo stood there for a long moment, listening to the night, listening to his own heartbeat. And then he turned and went back to the forest. The journey back to the cave felt longer in the dark. Every sound made Kojo jump. Every shadow seemed to watch him. But he pressed on, driven by something he could not name, greed, yes, but also something deeper. A need to prove that he was more than what the village saw. He reached the cave and squeezed through the opening. Inside, the bronze figures seemed to glow brighter in the darkness, as if they knew what he was about to do. Kojo began to carry them out, one by one. They were heavier than he expected, and the edges were sharp, cutting into his palms, leaving his hands slick with blood. But he did not stop. He made trip after trip, his back screaming, his lungs burning, until all the bronze was out of the cave. And then he carried it, piece by piece, back to Amadi's compound. He hid the bronze deep inside Amadi's granary, beneath the yams, where no one would think to look unless they were searching. And then Kojo stood there, in the moonlight, staring at what he had done. For a moment, just a moment, he felt something like regret. But then he thought of the way the elders looked at Amadi, the way the women smiled at Amadi, the way the village trusted Amadi. And the regret turned to something else. Something cold and sharp. Kojo took a burning stick from his own fire and walked to the center of the village, to the square where the elders held their meetings. He set a small fire, just enough to wake people, just enough to cause alarm. And then he began to scream. Fire! Fire! Help! Amadi has set fire to the square. People poured from their huts, confused, half asleep, their faces illuminated by the flames. Kojo was wild, his eyes wide, his voice breaking with false horror. I saw him. I followed him tonight. He has been stealing from the ancestors. He tried to burn the evidence. The crowd gathered, murmuring, shocked. The elders arrived, their faces grave, their movements slow with age but sharp with authority. What is this madness, Kojo? The head elder demanded. Kojo pointed toward Amadi's compound, his hand shaking. Search his granary. You will find the proof. I did not want to believe it. He is my brother. But I cannot let lies protect a thief. They dragged Amadi from his sleep. He stumbled into the square, barely awake, his eyes struggling to focus, his voice thick with confusion. What is happening? Kojo, what is this? The elders and a crowd of villagers tore through his compound. They ripped open the granary. And there, beneath the yams, gleaming in the torchlight like accusations made flesh, were the bronze figures. The crowd gasped. Women covered their mouths. Men shook their heads. Amadi's face went pale. He looked at the bronze, then at the crowd, then at Kojo. And in that moment, understanding washed over him like cold water. His eyes met Kojo's, and in them was not anger, but something far worse, disappointment. Betrayal. Heartbreak. Kojo, he whispered, his voice barely audible. Why? Kojo looked away, unable to hold his friend's gaze. I am sorry, Amadi. But I cannot protect a thief. Not even you. The trial was held the next morning. The entire village gathered in the square, a sea of faces, some angry, some sad, all confused. The elders sat in a semicircle on their stools, their expressions carved from stone. Amadi stood in the center, his hands bound with rope, his head bowed. He did not struggle. He did not shout. He only stood there, silent, as if the weight of the accusation had crushed something inside him. Kojo sat among the crowd, his face a mask of sorrow, his eyes wet with tears he had summoned on command. The head elder, a man named Okari whose beard was white as cotton and whose voice carried the weight of 60 harvests, spoke first. Amadi, son of Udoka, you stand accused of stealing sacred treasures from the ancestors. These treasures were found in your possession. What do you say? Amadi lifted his head. His voice was quiet but clear, cutting through the noise of the crowd like a blade. I did not steal them, Elder Okari. I found them. In the forest of echoes, in a hidden cave. I told Kojo. Only Kojo. I was going to bring them to you, to the council, so that you could decide what should be done. I swear this on my father's grave. The crowd murmured. Some believed him. But others looked at the bronze in his granary and shook their heads. Elder Okari frowned. If you intended to bring them to us, why were they hidden in your granary? Amadi's eyes found Kojo in the crowd. Because Kojo put them there. The mama turned to outrage. People shouted. Kojo stood, his face stricken, his voice cracking with emotion. Elders, please. Please, let me speak. This man, Amadi, has been my friend since we were children. I do not want to believe this. But I must tell the truth, even if it breaks my heart. Amadi found the bronze, yes. But when he showed it to me, he spoke of selling it in the next village. He said we could be rich, that we could leave Okari and live like kings. I refused. I told him it was wrong. And when I refused, he threatened me. He said if I told anyone, he would say I was the thief. I had no choice. I had to tell the truth. The lie was perfect. It was smooth and believable, wrapped in just enough emotion to seem real. And because Kojo was beloved, because he was helpful and kind and always there when someone needed him, people believed. Even those who knew Amadi, who had seen his honesty, began to doubt. Because why would Kojo lie? Amadi closed his eyes. He did not argue. He did not beg. He knew the truth, that in a contest between charm and honesty, charm often wins. Elder Okari stood, his face heavy with sadness. Amadi, the evidence is clear. The bronze was found in your home. Your story, though it may be true, cannot be proven. And Kojo, who has served this village faithfully, has testified against you. Therefore, the council has decided. You are cast out. You will leave Okari and never return. You will enter the forest of echoes and take your shame with you. May the ancestors show you mercy, for we cannot. Amadi did not cry. He did not protest. He looked once more at Kojo, and his voice, when he spoke, was soft but it carried. The forest has ears, Kojo. And the earth has a memory. One day, the truth will speak, and you will not be able to silence it. Then he turned and walked toward the forest. The crowd parted. No one stopped him. No one said goodbye. And Kojo watched him go, feeling a strange mixture of triumph and dread. In the months that followed, Kojo's life changed. He was given Amadi's land. He was invited to sit among the elders at council meetings. People came to him for advice, for help, for blessings. He was no longer just liked, he was respected. He had everything he wanted. But at night, alone in his hut, Kojo could not sleep. He heard Amadi's voice in the wind. He saw Amadi's face in the flames of his fire. He told himself it was guilt, and guilt would fade with time. He told himself he had done what was necessary. But the dreams came anyway, dreams of the forest, of bronze figures that moved and whispered, of Amadi standing in the dark, watching him with sad, knowing eyes. 1 year passed. The village prepared for the festival of New Yams, the greatest celebration of the year, a time to honor the harvest and give thanks to the earth. The square was decorated with palm fronds and bright cloth. Women roasted goats and pounded yam. Men brewed palm wine and sang songs. Children ran through the stalls, their laughter bright as sunlight. And Kojo, now an elder, was chosen to give the opening speech. He spent days preparing his words. He wanted them to be remembered. He wanted to solidify his place, his reputation, his power. On the morning of the festival, he stood on the platform in the center of the square, looking out at the sea of faces, faces that smiled at him, trusted him, loved him. He felt invincible. He opened his mouth to speak. But the words that came out were not his own. Why, my brother? The voice was Amadi's, soft, sorrowful, unmistakable. It came from inside Kojo's chest, echoing through the square like a bell. The crowd fell silent. Kojo's eyes went wide with terror. He tried to speak again, tried to force his own words out, but again, Amadi's voice emerged. Why did you trade my life for bronze? Kojo clutched at his chest, his face twisting, his breath coming in gasps. He tried to run, but his legs would not obey. The voice continued, steady and relentless, telling the story of that night, the cave, the bronze, the betrayal, the lies. Every detail. Every sin. The crowd listened, frozen, horrified. Mothers pulled their children close. The elders rose from their seats, their faces carved in shock and disgust. Kojo fell to his knees, clawing at his own chest as if he could tear the voice out, but it would not stop. It spoke of greed, of envy, of a friendship murdered for gold. When the voice finally fell silent, the square was utterly quiet. Kojo looked up, his face wet with tears, his hands shaking. He looked at the faces around him, faces that had once smiled at him with love, now staring at him with something far worse than anger. Disappointment. Disgust. Pity. Elder Okoye stepped forward, his voice cold and final. Leave, Kojo. Leave this place and never return. You are no longer one of us. Kojo stumbled to his feet. He did not speak. He could not. He ran past the market, past the Iroko tree, past the boundary stones. He ran into the forest of echoes, and the tree swallowed him whole. Some say he still wanders that forest, his chest forever echoing with Amadi's voice, never silent, never free. Others say Amadi returned to the village years later, quiet and kind as ever, forgiven and welcomed. And some say Amadi became a spirit of the forest, a guardian protecting it from men like Kojo. But this much is certain, you can paint a leopard's spots, but the rain will always wash them clean. The earth remembers. And truth, no matter how deep you bury it, will claw its way back to the surface. If this story stirred something in you, share it. And remember, gold fades, but a name, once stained, is stained forever. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more inspiring stories. See you next time.